The rescue pod tumbled through space like a dying star, its hull breached in 17 places, life support failing. Inside, Ethan Rivers clutched the safety harness and prepared to die. He'd been a freight navigator for 6 years, hauling cargo between human colonies on the outer rim. It was boring work, safe work, until a meteor storm turned his ship into debris. The escape pod was his last hope, but even that was failing. Oxygen levels dropping, hull temperature rising. Navigation systems fried. This was a bad way to go. Then came the light. Brilliant violet beams locked onto his pod, and he felt the gentle pull of a tractor beam. Through the cracked viewport, Ethan saw a ship unlike anything in human records, sleek and organic, like a living creature of silver and amethyst, easily 3 kilometers long. His radio crackled to life with a voice speaking a language he shouldn't have understood but somehow did. "Unknown vessel, you have entered Zarian sovereign space. Your craft is failing. We are bringing you aboard. Do not resist." Ethan wanted to laugh, resist. He could barely move. The Zarian ship swallowed his pod like a whale taking krill. He felt the artificial gravity shift, heard the hiss of pressurization, and then the pod door opened to reveal 3 figures in ceremonial armor that seemed to flow like liquid metal. "Human," one of them said, its voice carrying harmonics that made Ethan's bones vibrate. The translator implant they'd given him during extraction rendered the words into something comprehensible. "You're far from your territorial space." "Meteor storm," Ethan managed, his voice hoarse. "Lost my ship. I'm just a freight navigator, no threat to anyone." The guards exchanged glances. One spoke into a communication device in rapid Zarian that the translator struggled to follow. Then they helped him up, surprisingly gentle for beings who stood nearly 7 feet tall. "The royal court will determine your status," the lead guard said. "You are to be treated as a guest until then. Come." Royal court. Ethan's knowledge of Zarian culture was limited to the basic briefings all human spacers received. Ancient civilization, technologically advanced, isolationist but not hostile. They'd made contact with humanity 50 years ago, established diplomatic relations, and then largely ignored the younger species. Humans were considered harmless, barely worth noticing. Being brought before royalty seemed excessive for a random rescue. They led him through corridors that defied physics, walls that shifted color based on occupancy, floors that adjusted their gravity to accommodate his shorter stature, ceilings that displayed what looked like real-time views of distant nebulae. The ship was a work of art and engineering that made human technology look like cave paintings. Finally, they reached massive doors carved from what appeared to be crystallized starlight. The guards straightened, their armor resonating with a ceremonial tone. "You will be presented to Princess Lyrene Starweaver, third of the royal line, commander of the Void Fleet and keeper of ancient memories," the lead guard intoned. "Show proper respect." The doors opened. The throne room beyond took Ethan's breath away. It was a cathedral of light and shadow, with pillars that seemed to be carved from solidified darkness and a ceiling that showed the actual cosmos above them. No projection, somehow the real thing. At the far end, on a dais of floating crystal, sat figures of obvious importance. But Ethan's eyes were drawn immediately to one. Princess Lyrene Starweaver was beautiful in a way that transcended species. Her skin held the faint luminescence of moonlight on water, her features delicate yet strong. She wore robes of deep violet that seemed woven from captured starlight, and her hair, if it could be called hair, flowed like liquid silver shot through with veins of amethyst. But it was her eyes that stopped Ethan cold. They were violet, deep, infinite violet that seemed to contain entire galaxies. And as she looked at him, those eyes went wide with something that looked like shock. No, not shock, terror. The entire room went silent. The other members of the court, advisors and nobles who'd been engaged in quiet conversation, turned to look. The guards flanking Ethan tensed, hands moving to weapons. Princess Lyrene's hands, which had been resting calmly on the arms of her seat, now gripped the crystal so hard it began to crack. Her mouth opened as if to speak, but no sound emerged. "Your Highness," one of the advisors, an elderly Zarian with silver skin, stepped forward. "Is something wrong?" She didn't answer. Her eyes remained locked on Ethan, scanning his face with an intensity that made him want to step back. But the guards behind him had closed ranks, blocking any retreat. I don't understand," Ethan said, his voice breaking the terrible silence. "Did I do something wrong? I'm just a human. I was rescued. I don't mean any." "His eyes," Princess Lyrene finally whispered, and the whole room leaned in to hear. "Look at his eyes." Ethan blinked in confusion. His eyes, they were brown, completely ordinary human brown, nothing special about them. But the court was staring at him now with expressions ranging from fear to fascination to outright hostility. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "It can't be. The same color, the destroyer. Impossible, he was ended centuries ago." "Princess," the elderly advisor said urgently, "surely you don't think, leave us." Lyrene commanded, her voice suddenly strong, carrying authority that silenced every whisper. "Everyone except the royal guard, now." The court filed out, shooting glances at Ethan that ranged from curious to murderous. When only the guards remained, Lyrene descended from her dais with movements that seemed to defy gravity. She approached Ethan slowly, as if he might detonate. When she stood before him, barely an arm's length away, Ethan could see she was trembling. "What is your name?" she asked. "Ethan Rivers. I'm a freight navigator from the outer colonies. I was caught in a meteor storm and—" "Show me your right arm." "What? Your right arm? Show it to me." Confused, Ethan rolled up his sleeve. His forearm was unremarkable, pale skin, a few old scars from his years in space, a faded tattoo of coordinates to his home system, and a birthmark, a dark patch on his inner forearm that he'd had since birth, shaped like. Actually, he'd never been quite sure what shape it was. It shifted depending on the light, sometimes looking like a star, sometimes like a geometric pattern. Princess Lyrene inhaled sharply. Her hand reached out, stopped just before touching his skin, trembling in the air between them. "It's him," she breathed. "By the eternal void, it's actually him." "Your Highness," the lead guard said carefully. "What are you saying?" Lyrene turned to face her guards, and Ethan saw tears streaming down her luminescent face. 700 years ago, during the War of Extinction, our empire was nearly destroyed. We faced an enemy that had conquered 1,000 systems, that turned entire species into weapons. We were losing, billions died. Ethan had heard vague references to this in the historical briefings. The Zarians didn't like talking about it. "Then came the Destroyer," Lyrene continued. "A warrior unlike any we'd ever seen. He appeared from nowhere, commanding power that rivaled our entire fleet. He saved us, turned the tide of the war with strategies and abilities we couldn't comprehend. But in the final battle, when he unleashed his full strength to eliminate the enemy's core, he was consumed by his own power. His body was destroyed, scattered across dimensional barriers. She looked back at Ethan, her violet eyes searching his face. Before he died, he made a prophecy. He said he would return when the Zarian Empire faced its next great threat. He would be reborn in a form we wouldn't recognize, bearing the mark of the void on his arm and eyes that held the same spectrum as our royal bloodline. Wait, Ethan said, his mind reeling. You think I'm, what, the reincarnation of this destroyer? Not just think, Lyrene said. She gestured to the guards. Scanner, now. One guard produced a device that projected a holographic field around Ethan. Symbols appeared in the air, cascading sequences that meant nothing to him. But they clearly meant something to the Zarians. The guards exchanged shocked looks. One of them actually stepped back. His DNA, the guard with the scanner said, voice shaking. It's impossible. He's human, but his genetic structure contains markers that match. The royal bloodline, Lyrene finished. The same markers we all carry, descendants of the first navigators who sailed between stars before other species achieved sentience. Her eyes fixed on Ethan again. You're not just human. You're human and Zarian. Somehow, impossibly, you carry both ancestries. Ethan felt like the floor had dropped away beneath him. That can't be right. I'm from Earth. My parents were human. I have birth records, genetic profiles, everything's normal. What do you know about your parents? Lyrene asked gently. They were colonists, died when I was young in an atmospheric processor accident. I was raised in the colonial orphanage. The words came automatically, a story he'd told 100 times. But now, under Lyrene's intense gaze, it suddenly felt hollow. I never saw their bodies. The accident was catastrophic. They said there was nothing to recover. Because there were no bodies, Lyrene said. Ethan, what if you weren't born on that colony? What if you were placed there, your memories adjusted, your records fabricated? Why would anyone do that? To hide you. The destroyer had enemies, factions that wanted to ensure he never returned. If they knew where to find his reincarnation as a child, they would have killed you before you could awaken. Awaken to what? Ethan's voice rose with frustration and fear. I'm nobody. I navigate freight ships. I don't have any special powers or abilities or... He stopped, because Lyrene had reached out and placed her hand over his birthmark. The moment her skin touched his, something happened. The mark blazed with light, not metaphorically, but actually glowed with the same violet radiance that suffused Lyrene's form. Ethan felt it in his bones, a resonance that had been sleeping his entire life suddenly waking up. The room around them seemed to shift, reality bending at the edges of his vision. And he saw things, memories that weren't his. A battle in space, fleets so vast they blotted out stars. A weapon, no, a person, standing at the heart of impossible destruction, wielding power that could tear through dimensional barriers. And a choice made in desperation to sacrifice everything to save a civilization. Stop! Ethan yanked his arm away and the visions ceased. He staggered backward, breathing hard. What was that? Your memories returning, Lyrene said softly. Locked away to protect you, but triggered by contact with the royal bloodline. She looked at her own hand, still glowing faintly. I am a direct descendant of Emperor Corvash the Eternal, who ruled when the Destroyer first appeared. Our bloodlines were bonded in the ancient way, a pact that tied his power to the protection of the Zarian throne. This is insane, Ethan said. But even as he spoke, he felt something shifting inside him. The birthmark on his arm continued to glow faintly, and his eyes, when he caught his reflection in the polished walls, no longer looked entirely brown. There were flecks of violet appearing like stars emerging at twilight. "Your Highness," the lead guard said urgently, "the council must be informed if he truly is the destroyer returned." "They'll want him eliminated," Lyrene said flatly. "Half the council believes the prophecy is a threat, not a promise. They think the destroyer will finish what he started, destroy our empire rather than save it." "Why would they think that?" Ethan asked. "Because power corrupts. Because 700 years is long enough for legends to become nightmares. Because the destroyer didn't just save us, he revealed how fragile we are, how easily one being with enough power could end everything we've built." Lyrene's expression hardened. "The Council has spent centuries trying to ensure such power never arises again. Your existence threatens their carefully maintained order. So what happens now?" "Now," Lyrene said, decision crystallizing in her voice, "I protect you. The prophecy states you'll return when we face our next great threat. That threat is here. The Void Reavers have breached our outer defenses. A new enemy unlike anything we've faced since the War of Extinction. The Council wants to handle it with conventional warfare, but our simulations show a 93% chance of total defeat. And you think I can stop them? I'm a freight navigator who just found out he might be the reincarnation of an ancient weapon. I don't know how to access these supposed powers. I don't even know if I want to." "Then we teach you," Lyrene said simply. "Before the Council decides you're too dangerous to live, before the Void Reavers reach our core systems, before the choice is taken from both of us." Ethan wanted to run, wanted to demand they put him in a pod and send him back to human space, back to the simple life of navigating freight routes and not being the prophesied savior-destroyer of an alien empire. But when he looked at Lyrene, this princess who'd gone silent with terror at the sight of him, who was now standing between him and certain execution, he saw something in her eyes, not just fear or hope, but genuine faith that he could be more than he thought possible. "All right," he said, the words feeling like stepping off a cliff. "What do I need to do?" "First, we conduct a full investigation into your origins, find out who placed you in that colony and why. Second, we begin unlocking your inherited memories, carefully so you don't lose yourself in the process. Third," she glanced at the guards, "we prepare for the Council's inevitable attempt to eliminate you." "They'll try to kill me?" "They'll try," one of the guards said with a grim smile. "But we serve the royal bloodline and the princess has declared you under her protection. That means something." Over the following days, Ethan learned what it meant to be at the center of a conspiracy 7 centuries in the making. Lyrene's investigators discovered that his parents had been Zarian agents in deep cover, tasked with protecting the destroyer's reincarnation until he came of age. They died not in an accident, but defending him from assassins sent by a council faction that had learned of his location. The orphanage records were falsified, his memories of childhood adjusted by sophisticated technology. Even his choice to become a freight navigator wasn't entirely his own. It had been subtly influenced to keep him moving, never staying in one place long enough for enemies to find him. "My whole life was a lie," Ethan said, staring at the evidence displayed in Lyrene's private study. "Your life was a protection," she corrected gently. "Everything was designed to keep you safe until the appointed time. And now the Void Reavers are 3 weeks from our core systems. The Council meets tomorrow to decide your fate, and you have a choice to make. Ethan looked down at his arm, where the birthmark now glowed constantly with violet light. In the past days, he'd begun accessing the memories carefully under Lyrene's guidance. He'd seen battles, felt power that could reshape reality, understood strategies that spanned dimensions. But he'd also seen the price. The destroyer's final moments, choosing to burn himself out rather than become a threat to those he'd saved. A lonely death scattered across cosmic barriers, sustained only by the hope that he might return when needed again. "The prophecy says I could be your savior or your destroyer," Ethan said. "Which do you believe?" Lyrene stepped closer, taking his glowing hand in hers. "I believe you're a person, not a weapon, not a prophecy, but someone given an impossible choice and trying to do the right thing." The same as he was 700 years ago. He failed in the end, became the very thing they feared. He saved billions, that's not failure. Her violet eyes met his eyes that now matched his own as the transformation continued. "And you have something he didn't. What's that? Someone who believes in you before you've proven anything, someone who'll stand with you regardless of what the council decides." She smiled, sad and determined. "You're not alone this time, Ethan Rivers. Remember that." The next morning, Ethan stood before the Zarian High Council, 12 ancient beings who'd governed the Empire for millennia. They looked at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. "The human claims to be the destroyer reborn," Chancellor Vorath said, his tone dripping with skepticism. "We have seen the genetic evidence, the memories, the marks, but we have also seen simulations of what such power could do in the wrong hands." "Then test me," Ethan said, his voice stronger than he felt. "The Void Reavers are coming. Let me face them. Judge me by my actions, not your fears. And if you fail, if you prove to be a weapon we cannot control, then I'll do what he did before," Ethan said, meeting each council member's eyes in turn. "I'll remove myself from the equation, but I'm asking for the chance to try, to be the savior the prophecy promised, not the destroyer you fear." The council deliberated for 3 hours. In the end, they reached a compromise. Ethan would be allowed to engage the Void Reaver's advance force. If he succeeded, he would be granted provisional status as the destroyer returned. If he failed or showed signs of losing control, elimination protocols would activate. Princess Lyrene stood with him as the decision was announced. "Are you ready for this?" Ethan looked at his hands, now glowing with violet energy he was just beginning to understand. Felt the weight of memories from a life lived 700 years ago. Knew that somewhere in the approaching darkness an enemy waited that had destroyed countless civilizations. "No," he admitted, "but I don't think anyone ever really is." "Then we face it together," Lyrene said, and her hand found his. "Savior or destroyer, hero or weapon, whatever you become, you won't face it alone." The Void Reavers arrived 6 days later. And Ethan Rivers, formerly a simple freight navigator, now the reincarnation of the destroyer, flew out to meet them with the princess of the Zarian Empire at his side. The battle would determine more than the fate of one empire. It would answer the question that had haunted the prophecy for 7 centuries. Could power be wielded without corruption? Could a destroyer choose to save rather than end? Could a man who'd lost his identity find himself in the ruins of someone else's legend? The cosmos held its breath, waiting for the answer.